There's a bird out there making a lot of noise. Hi there, it's Mark, and welcome to Book Ramble. I was tagged by Heather Reeds on how Proust can change your reading, so thank you, Heather. And here are my answers to that tag. And I apologise, I got a bit of a cold, head cold. I can hear it. I don't feel bad at all, but my voice, wow. Prompt 1, how to live life today. If there was only time to read one more book before the world ended, which book would you read? When I lived in the UK, and I assume it's still going, there was a thing on Radio 4 called Desert Island Discs. Imagine that someone was washed up on a desert island, what books would they have? But they were never allowed to have the Bible or Shakespeare. You had to choose something else. But, hey, this is not Desert Island Discs. I think either Shakespeare or the Bible. So I got this, The Complete Works of William Shakespeare, and I've got this. The reason I got this is because this one's just too big. I started reading King John. It's sitting on my desk, and you can see there's some white paper where I'm making notes. And it's a wonderful book. I'm going to keep it, definitely. But it's not portable. This one is. So something like this would be the one I would choose. Font isn't too bad. I mean, you got everything in here, haven't you? And in fact, I'm just about to do an episode next after this about this one book. There's a preface to this. This was written in 1948. About the influence, the growing and perpetual influence of Shakespeare, which I want to talk to the camera about. But really, I think it would be this one. I'm an atheist, but I'm just obsessed with this, just reading it. So, that one probably. Prompt 2 seems to have a lot of sub-prompts. How to read for yourself. Name 2 books which had one or more of the Maquis de Lau effects on you. I don't know Proust. Don't even know who this guy is, the Maquis de Lau. But then A, to recognise what we have in common with people who seem different than us or lived at different times. Well, again, either Shakespeare or the Bible. Any history book, anything from Homer to Plato, anything like that I would read. I've got to name 2 books. Recognise what we have in common with people. Oh, it would be that one. The Iliad. No, I've changed my mind. 2 books, okay. What we have in common, and yet we're different times. Bible, Plato. There you go. I did a degree in theology and philosophy. I taught the subjects in the UK. These things tell you that we haven't changed much as human beings at all. You strip away whether you agree with the theology or the philosophy, people are people. We have these ideas, we're confronted by the world, what do we make sense of and how do we do that, and blah, blah, blah. Nothing's ever changed. We're all confronted with the same problems. And again, with Shakespeare, the emotions, this is an emotional history. Oh, this is difficult, Heather. I can't narrow it down to 2. I know I've got 2. Oh dear. This might be the same 2 books up throughout. So, let's go for Shakespeare and the Bible. To have our own thoughts and emotions echoed and therefore to feel validated and less alone. I don't need personally to feel validated, but 2 books. I might as well just finish here and say each one's going to be the Bible and Shakespeare. That'd be dull, wouldn't it? Feel validated. I don't feel the need to be validated. I'm too much of a lone wolf. And less alone. I don't feel alone. Because I'm a lone wolf. I don't think I can answer that one. C. To read about an idea or emotion and recognise it as one you have experienced but never articulated. Actually, I've got to get this out of my bag now. Currently reading this one, Slaughterhouse 5. Interesting book. I knew about it. It's not what I thought it would be. But what's in here, emotions and recognize you have experienced but never articulated, the idea of time travel. I've never experienced it, but the way in which it's written in here, that Vonnegut talks about this guy Billy Pilgrim, he keeps jumping from moments in his own life. From when he was in the war in Dresden to the 60s, and of course it's seen as an anti-war book. But he talks about the fact that he meets these group of aliens called the Tralmaphadorians who see us in the 4D time. So we never die. You can go back to our youth and you'd meet yourself and you'd always be there. Because we've existed in the past and we have had moments, they will never disappear. Hard to articulate here, I'll do this when I do a talk about the book. But yeah, that's something that I've often felt dislocated from time, especially when I was younger. But I've never been able to articulate it. Never felt the need. And I'm not sure I'm answering the question now. I know in my mind what I think I want to say, but I don't know if I'm going to get that across. Time. Is it linear? Or is it a timey-wimey thing? D. To draw attention to something we had previously ignored or failed to recognize, so that we see the world differently thereafter. Oh, Plato. Plato's Republic. Definitely. So I've done the first two books. Part of the Republic is where Plato, via the voice of Socrates, brings in this idea of the cave analogy, that we all in our mind see what we think is real, but it's only shadows. We don't see what is real. We don't come out the cave of ignorance into the light of reason enough. And that needs to be drawn attention to more. When I lived in the UK, there was a moment in the mid to late 90s when all of a sudden celebrities were being confronted by people who argued with them because they'd seen them in a soap and said, "How dare you do that to this character?" As though that's what they really did. They could not distinguish between the fact that this person is an actor or an actress and they're portraying a character. When people met them in real life, some people thought, right, I'm going to have an argument with this guy because I don't like what he's done. It's got nothing to do with them. It's like Shakespeare. Just because you act Hamlet doesn't mean you are Hamlet. But some people seem to get confused. And that was becoming a big thing in the 90s, if I remember, especially in the UK. And that's because they're in the cave. They need to come out and realise that what they're seeing on the wall, or in this case TV, that's not real. It's not real. So, yeah, that needs to be talked more about. So I'd say Plato's Republic. Question 3. How to take your time. If you had to spend a week in a cabin in the woods, these problems are so long, with no phone, television, radio or internet, and no transport except your 2 feet, and there was a hardback copy of Proust's In Search of Lost Time in that cabin, would you try reading the book or would you do something else, and what would that be? Well, I'll do both. It's not either or, it's both, isn't it? In your spare time, if that's the only book you would read it, I've never read it, but you'd also be living and getting food and going to the toilet and going out for walks, so both. 4. How to suffer successfully. Yeah, I can talk about that. Is it true for you that some kind of suffering or unhappiness is probably what made you a reader or a writer? Yes. Yeah, definitely. I am wise because I have experience. I have experience because I am unwise. We do things, or things are done to us, that can sting and hurt. Especially if you've always felt as though you don't really belong anywhere, or you see groups of people put to the side, slightly removed. That's me to a T. And if you choose to live ahead of the curve, so to speak, be different, be innovative, often you'll be ignored. It takes time for people or society to catch up with a lot of things. So think about Van Gogh, completely ignored in his own time. He's now considered to be one of the greatest painters of all time. He suffered successfully, unfortunately ended his own life, as we know. So suffering probably is the wrong word. It's experience. It can make you unhappy. But then that provides a prompt to often produce great art. And I have read, and I do believe, that the greatest art and writings often come from people who have suffered, or it talks about people suffering. It has meaning, depth, but obviously it doesn't appeal to everyone. The key is to confront it and to be able or willing to write about your experiences or your sufferings. And it certainly has informed my own writing. The book that I now completed, it's about a guy who suffers quite a lot. And some of it, in part, is almost autobiographical, but it's a different era. It's not the era I grew up in, and so on. And I don't want to give things away. But yeah, it does inform choices that you are drawn to. I think I'm drawn to the likes of Plato because of ethics. How should people behave? What makes a good, just society? I'm drawn to the stories in here, the Bible, because they're a bit like Shakespeare. Shakespeare, even in his history plays, they're not history. It's an emotional history. It's how people change. When we meet them in the play to begin with, how do they end up? That's the key to understanding Shakespeare. And it's very similar with accounts in here. I'm drawn to that, and I think that definitely is a spur to make you want to read or write in a certain way, I think. Otherwise, what is spurring you? And it's like everything. You can try and do things for the wrong reasons. If it's to make a coin or to be seen and thought to be successful, I think that's the wrong reason. There has to be some kind of suffering. In my own experience, and this is not going to resonate with anyone unless you're of a certain time and place. So I grew up in the 70s. And I have to say, the music of the mid-70s, just before disco came along, was very middle of the road, very samey, soft. And then disco came along, and the early days shook things up. But in Britain, by the time we got to 76, 77, Britain had gone through some difficult economic years, specifically the 3-day week, where houses only got piped electricity to them for 4 days. Because Britain became the sick man of Europe. The economy was going nowhere. That spurred people to start doing music. So we began to see the arrival of punk in 76. There was a lot of anger and frustration with the way Britain was going. That suffering made the music change and the type of music, which is why we get groups like the Stranglers and the Clash, because they were dissatisfied with what was happening. And you all obviously then get the extreme groups who just do it for anarchy's sake, like the early Pistols, Sex Pistols. And then that, as the economy improved towards the end of the 70s, coming into the 80s, that music then started to flow away. We saw then new wave and a bit more optimism coming through. But that period of punk rock was because of hardship and suffering. I think I've answered enough for that now, so I'll move on. 5. How to express your emotions. Think of any book you recently read and enjoyed. In 100 words or less? No way. Describe what you think was good about it without using adverbs or adjectives. I can do it in mime. Well, you recently read and enjoyed. That means I've got to have finished it. Well, it takes me so long to finish books. Well, I'm almost finished this. Let's imagine I've finished this, so I'm going to do this in mime. I'm going to have to DNF that one. Interesting that we're linking emotions to words, but you can't use certain words. Language is really not sufficient to express our emotions. The language can constrict how we portray what we're really feeling. They're inadequate. And some of the words don't quite come into focus with how you're really thinking. We say, I'm feeling frustrated and anger, but is that really what you're feeling, and so on. So it's a good question. I couldn't answer that. 6. How to be a good friend. Think of a book where a friendship is central and discuss whether Proust's principle about 100% honesty being bad for friendship is true or not. Proust says you cannot be 100% honest because that's bad for friendship. Well, it's not much of a friendship then if you can't be honest. That isn't friendship. But he's talking of a time and place that's different to our own now. There were a lot more constrictions as to how you could behave with people and in public. Probably in France and Britain at the time. Think of a book where friendship is central. The interesting thing about friendship, it tends to be between a person and another person. But the true friend is yourself. You're going to live with yourself all your life. And, your mind could be your best friend. It could also be your worst enemy. You're sitting here saying, how dare you do this? Who do you think you are? You're not good enough to do this. Doubt. But if you're a friend of yourself and you're optimistic and you're full of hope, then that's the best friend, isn't it? Well, what book talks about that? There's very few books, in fact, that talk about the inner self as being the only thing that really is important. Not to the point of solipsism or narcissism. No, don't mean that at all. I mean that you should trust yourself, forgive yourself, be grateful to yourself. Because otherwise you can't trust and you can't forgive and you can't be a friend to others. Recently, the inner feelings of this guy is coming through, Billy Pilgrim. There's not that many books. Perhaps there should be more. And I can't think of any at the moment. I'll go on to the next question. 7. How to open your eyes. Is there a book that opened your eyes to the beauty of a different genre, don't care for genre, or different type of writing or different subject matter? Yeah, when I was about 13. I've talked about this in one of the books that influences, or has influenced myself, Lord of the Rings. Because it introduced different characters in a different world, and it opened my eyes to the beauty of difference, the beauty of language, the beauty of the setting and the pace and the craftsmanship that Tolkien brings to bear on everything. I've read books in what is considered this genre of fantasy where people haven't thought about the language and the words and are they true to the so-called culture they come from. They've just cherry-picked names. In fact, one of the worst things I ever came across in a fantasy book was in the 80s. I can't remember the title. You may recognise the book. They had a map, a fantasy map, which effectively was California turned upside down. And Los Angeles was spelt backwards. So it became Sol Snigla or something. And it was only when I realised it was mirror language, I thought, oh, okay. Do some effort with the maps and the words, please. This one opened my eyes, and am I answering it correctly? To the beauty of a different, or literature, type of writing and different subject matter. Different is the key word there, and I'm not sure what would make it different. Probably what you're not exposed to, and so on, so yeah. Likewise, and again, I keep referring to this, Scripture, if you read it in the original, say the New Testament, Greek, it reads very different to the Latin, and the Latin reads very different to the original English of, say, this version, the King James Version, to modern. Well, think about that. And the different types of style of writing and the ideas that those languages have will give you a different viewpoint on the same subject matter. So, yeah, that will open your eyes. 8. How to be happy in love. Do you have any personal pointers to help a flagging reader refresh their love for reading? Yes. If you're in a slump, I fervently believe it's because you're reading the wrong type of book. Let's take, for example, this one. It's just selected essays from English literature. I'm just randomly opening it up, and it's William Hazlitt. Actually, now he's a classic one. Hazlitt was one of the most popular writers of his time, about the time of Jane Austen. He's considered one of the greatest polemicists and prose writers of all time, completely forgotten now. Absolutely forgotten, along with Thomas Carlyle. If you read that and it doesn't resonate, it's because either the era in which he's writing, what's being written about, or whatever, is not vibing with you. So don't read it. If you struggle to finish a book, and often on BookTube I'm hearing DNF, do not finish, blah, 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 that's an absolute sign to say you are reading the wrong type of books. And if you keep reading the same type of books, it's like having the same meal of no flavour, and eventually it's going to get boring. If you are stuck in the same room day after day after day, eventually you're going to get cabin fever. The mind rebels to the same routine, and it's one of the hardest things they say for prisoners. It's that routine. It makes your eyes turn into shark eyes. There's no life there. So with reading, get something that challenges you. Change your reading style. If you're always reading Westerns, try something else. Try, let's say, some classic literature from the 16th century, French poetry. For years and years, I rejected this guy. Now I can't get enough. That doesn't happen to everyone, but I came to realise what I was reading, and that's another thing, what you're reading, and if you're struggling and you keep going to slumps, you may not be ready. There will be periods in life in which you're just not ready to read. Don't worry about it. Just do something else. You may come back to it. I ignored Shakespeare for years, and now I can just sit down and read this non-stop. I could read, again, this all day. I could read this all day. But if I try to read something, and no disrespect to, say, Catherine Cookson, I couldn't do it. It doesn't vibe with me. I think half the challenge is to find the style of writing that appeals to you. The only thing I could say is if you're flagging, to refresh is try something different. Something that will challenge you. Otherwise it's wallpaper. Every book is paper. Just like wallpaper on the wall. If it's not making you think, oh yeah, okay, oh, I didn't think that. If the prose, if the style doesn't appeal to you, try something else. 9. How to put books down. Can you do that? Is there a writer you once considered a kind of oracle, or a book you once thought you would always adore, but over time you have grown to see the other book differently? Well, yeah, Shakespeare I've just mentioned. If I had this conversation 10 years ago, 20, 30, when I was in the Navy, I would give different answers. Now I would say the key word there, adore. If you fan over something, fangirl, fanboy over something, even if you never have read anything, so let's say, for instance, somebody loves an actor, actress, and even if they give a bad performance, they're still going to love them. Not sure what that proves. You will convince yourself you're going to like something even if perhaps you could critique it. It's far better to approach a book as, I'm not going to adore it, but I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to respect it. I'm going to mull over what's being said. That's far more useful to do than just go down thinking, I must love this and this tells me everything. Plato is very important, but there's a lot of problems with the book and the writer. It's too convoluted. But if I was a fanboy of Plato, I would make excuses for stuff that potentially I shouldn't. And I don't think we should do that. I think we should look at each book in its own merits, but knowing that your opinion of the book will change over time anyway. So that's answered that one. It's not a problem to think, oh, I once loved this book, but I don't now. Well, great, but you did like it once, and that says a lot about the time and place. And if you come to like a book now, again, that says a lot about how you're changing. If we don't come to see books and authors differently over time, I think that's a problem. So Steve, a mate of mine, is a pastor, and he is a committed Christian, and we talk a lot about on one of our channels about this book. But he hated it for years and years. He came to it late in life. But he will say that he has to balance of what he wants to read and what he is reading, and it may not be the same thing. And likewise, if we're reading a book and I've got to avidly collect all the works of Plato, I think, why? There'll be some works of Plato that potentially won't be of use to you, because he can repeat some of the things he talks about. Some of them are very obscure. The Laws, his later work, is turgid and absolutely overblown fascism. I can't stand it. But Republic is great. I think we need to differentiate each book in their own, but know that you will change your mind. So, yeah, we're going to change our opinion, and I don't think that's a problem. It's a good thing. Keeps us fresh. And that's it. So thank you, Heather. Very interesting, thought-provoking tag. I found this quite difficult. I'm not sure my answers serve any purpose or are even focused enough to make sense. I'll know when I come to the editing. I'm going to tag some people. I have no idea who that is at the moment. I will do that when I find out who hasn't done it. But yeah, a good one. And Proust, interestingly, is the one that spurred this to be made. Never read Proust, but I'm aware with Jim over at Big Ideas, he's talking about Proust a lot now at the moment. So seems to be one that is gaining focus. My father-in-law loved Proust. He would read him avidly almost every day. That's it. Ta-ta for now.